Hi everyone, thank you. When you are asked, or when you plan to do a Siyum and you're not a big lumberman, you look for the Masechtot that have the most attractive number of dafim. And I know my brother-in-law, who's the reverse of that, went with Shabbos, which is I think like 120, 140 dafim. I looked at a few different Masechtot before choosing, and it came down to Makot and Mura and Shkolim. And I thought about Makot, which many people have learned all the punishments of the Sanhedrin. It's kind of fun to get the nitty gritty of how they kill people and execute and the details of that. It's interesting. I've never learned it before. Tamura, I didn't actually know what Tamura meant, and had to look that up first. So Tamura is an interesting concept in the Beis Hamikdash, having to do with if you exchange an animal that's been consecrated and will lose its kedusha if you deconsecrate it and things like that. Started to learn it, and it's a little bit dry for me, so I went to Shkolim, which I had learned before in the Daf Yomi cycle, which counted against it in my cheshbon, because one day I'd like to at least fill the holes. But I really remembered enjoying it very much, and so I figured we'd go with what you like. Shkolim's a very, I don't know if people are familiar with it. It's a very interesting Masechet because, here, let's say on the art scroll, it says on the thing, Talmud Bavli, the Shanstein Daf Yomi edition of Masechet Shkolim. But what's interesting is that Masechet Shkolim is in fact not Talmud Bavli. It's in the Yerushalmi, and has some interesting nuances because of that. One is it's the only Masechet in the Yerushalmi that's in the Daf Yomi cycle that many people do. And it also doesn't, the source of Daf is very unusual because it doesn't have what we're used to. It doesn't have Rashi, it doesn't have Tosfot, and it has different commentators that we're not as familiar with. The Masechet is really a great Masechet, and I really do think it's off the beaten path because of its not being in the Talmud Bavli, but I highly recommend it. It's like a book report. I read this book, and I highly recommend it, but I'll tell you why. It starts off with the basic idea of the mitzvah given in the Torah that every year that every Jew is commanded to give a half a shekel. And we know that because we read the Parsha in the Dalet Parshiot, and we also take do a remembrance for that around Purim time, and we give the half a shekel. And most of us think, and we've been taught, that the reason for it, and this was one of the reasons for it, was to do the census, so that that the people that have to give the half shekel are the people of military age, and it would give the heads and the leaders knowledge of how many fighters there were in the kahal and available to fight. But this Masechet really goes into, I would say, if I was going to put a title on it, I would say it's much more about tzedakah and about the different ways that you can give tzedakah, the different ways specifically that you would give donations to the Beis Hamikdash. For example, there were 13 pushkas, so to say, at the Beis Hamikdash for 13 different types of things, and it goes into incredible detail of if they find a coin in between two of the pushkas, which pushka do they put it in? Because you have the intent of the person, and you have in the Beis Hamikdash case, you have some serious issues because, for example, if it was supposed to go into a pushka that would have made it kodesh or something that had to be given as a korban on the Mizbeach, that can't just go to the pushka for Bedek Habayis to buy paint for the walls in the Beis Hamikdash, and because it has a different level of kedusha, and likewise, perhaps it's something in the pushka that only a kohen can eat. And so you can't then take it and put it into a pushka that would be otherwise. And so it's very interesting And I think there's a lot of practical things about it for us today, because many times we're faced with questions of if you're giving tzedakah yourself, when you're giving tzedakah yourself, or also if you're administering tzedakah or involved in any sort of organization. The question comes, what do you do with the extra money, say? And there are examples given in the Masechet. For example, if you raise money for a poor person's burial, and you raise, let's say, 100 shekel more than you need to give that poor person a simple burial, what do you do with the extra money? And the Gemara debates, well, you could either take that money and buy him a much nicer matzeva, like one that's carved and more permanent and beautiful, or maybe you should take that money and use it for the next pauper that needs money for that the burial. And so again, it's very practical, unlike maybe Tamura or something which doesn't have as many ways that you can relate it to today. This is very, very practical. And I just wanted to bring a one quick thing from the Gemara that talks about it that is very interesting. And it's also brought down in Yuma, talking about, again, the Voda Beis Mikdash. And this has to do with the Ketores. The Ketores was the incense that was burnt on the Mizbeach. And actually in Yuma, it brings down that there was a family, the Avitas family, and Avitinas family, and they knew the recipe for the Ketores. And even though it says what the recipe is, nobody knew what this one herb was referred. It says what it is. It's called the Mali Ashan, but nobody knew what that actually was, except for this family. It was, given down tradition through the family, and the family, got brought to the Sanhedrin, and they absolutely refused to tell what it was. And the reason it was so important was because this was the herb that made the smoke from this mizbeach go straight up in a straight line. And they wanted to know. And there's also a very similar story having to do with another family, the Gamu family. They were the ones in charge of making the lechem apanim, and only they knew how to do it in a way that they could get it out of the mold, and the lechem apanim wouldn't spoil in the week that it would sit on the shulchan. And again, they wouldn't tell over the secret, and they were brought to Sanhedrin. They were called, one of the Mishnayos and Yuma calls them evil people. And they explain that they asked them in the end why they won't do it, and they say because they have a Masorah that eventually the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed, and that when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, that idolaters, if they know how to do those things, will use those things for Avodah Zarah, and so they felt that they were the protectors to keep that secret, and they were then absolved of their evil moniker, I guess, and given a little bit of praise. But what I thought what was most interesting about it is that the Gamla family, they would never in their home, the Garmu family, okay, would never in their homes ever have, they call it pas nikia, which the Arthur translates as white bread. And the Avitas family, before a person in the Avitas family would get married, they would make the bride make a neder that and then put in the ketubah that she would never that she would never put on perfume in her life, this woman, okay? And the reason for both of those things that those families would do is because the bakers never wanted it to be accused that it was possible that they had taken any of the lechem apanim and were eating it themselves, and which would have been a violation of, I guess probably kares, I don't know, or worse. And same too by the Avicennas family. They didn't want anyone to ever be able to accuse them of that they took the Ketores and were using it to perfume their women. And the beautiful smell of the Ketores would be perfumed, so they banished it entirely. And so they give many, there's so many examples here about practices that they did in the Beis Hamikdash and practices that they did when building the Mishkan to prevent even the slightest whisper of impropriety when dealing with public funds, when dealing with communal funds or funds that are meant for a certain purpose, even to the point, I mean, this one's the most incredible one, even to the point where, Moshe is accused of becoming rich from the shards that came from the Luchot, and that they said that there was that people would say disparaging things about him. Look at his thighs, look how fat his legs are, and things like that. Again, someone as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, who is face to face with Hashem, could even be accused. And so you have to really again, lessons for us is to and again, other examples in the Beis Hamikdash also, how many people there would be needed to open one of the pushkas. They would never open a pushka by itself, and that the people would go in, they wouldn't have braided hair, and they wouldn't have pockets. It's almost like at a casino where they don't let the people have pockets when they go in the money room or a store that all the workers are wearing the hats that are clear. And that it's important for your own ethics, for our own ethics, to take those extra steps in our own ethics to prevent even the slightest possibility that someone could accuse you of that, and especially when you're doing something l'shma l'shem shamayim. It's very, very interesting lessons that we can learn from today. Now, it's really not very difficult to jump to that, to jump from that and discuss my mother-in-law, Victoria Galimidi, Vittel Moshe. Out of many of the people in the room, I knew her the least, or for the shortest amount of time. But I can tell you, in so many different examples, in the short amount of time I knew her, just the incredible midot of chesed and of communal responsibility and of and specifically the amazing, and people have no idea, the chesed that she did personally for me and for others. Very unassuming and not taking ads out of the paper or anything, but she was a very, very I think my wife likes the word because she says I'm not empathetic. But Ma was an incredibly empathetic person and would cry at night in bed over the problems that I had and the problems that Klal Yisrael had, and again, these ethics play into that, because it's only ethical people and people that take their ethics into their everyday and in their everyday work. I can't tell you how many. I'm sure everyone sees it. I see it at work. Religious Jews that are stealing and cheating and my Rebbe used to say that Rov Ganavim Yisraelim is a line from the Gemara, but it's important to take a step back once in a while and say, we have decided to live our lives by a certain code of ethics and a certain set of rules, and how to take that and put it, manipulate it into the things that you do every day. I think is crucially important. It was a great shock to lose my mother-in-law. It was also a great shock the day after Shiva when we found out that Cynthia was pregnant, and we feel her. Now that we have a 4-month-old baby, and not a day goes by that member of family, me or Cynthia, doesn't feel her loss, and that Ma would be there for this or see that and be there and be so excited to share the life events of all of her many grandchildren, both here and in Israel and in Florida, and so we miss her dearly, and we obviously bring merit and honor and supposed to her now, but it really isn't just like now, it's really a daily thing. You know, this is sort of off the script, but I'd be sort of remiss to not mention it, but I thought there's, if you'll bear with me one more minute, there's another one thing I wanted to say. Last night at 10:30, while I was putting, well, my wife is sick and the baby's sick and lots of crazy things going on, but I found out of nowhere that the patriarch of, the remaining patriarch of my family, my uncle, my great uncle Joe, Joseph Cohen, was nifter last night at 10:30, and at 93 years old. And I know we don't, you know, Chavila want to add things together, but the reason I mention it is I just want to draw the contrast of how very different their lives were, but through Torah and the things we learned, how in a sense they're really not that different. You know, Ma, Victoria Galimidi, she was born immediately after the war in Germany, after both her parents survived the camps, and they immigrated after a few stops. They ended up in Uruguay, and then of course they ended up with Dr. Galimidi. Both Ma and her mother, you know, moved to Elizabeth and built a home here and in the community and through their children and everything like that. You know, and you take my Uncle Joe, okay? My Uncle Joe, 93 years old, so whatever year that is he was born, he grew up in Presco, Iowa. They were the only Jewish family in Presco, Iowa. And the reason they were there was because his father moved to the United States from Russia in around 1912, right before World War I, and fleeing the Tsar's army. And they were classic Jewish peddlers. And my father makes the joke, but it's true. You ended up living where your horse died. And so he grew up in Iowa, and eventually, when he was about 12, and my grandmother was of marriageable age, 17, 18, they moved to the closest real Jewish community, which was in Minneapolis, so that they could find Jewish mates. And of course, my party found my grandfather, who my son is named after. And but the point is this, that you have like incredible adversity on either path, right? But in the end, you know, like I spoke about my Uncle Joe, I've never met a man, a kinder man, a more gentle man, a more honest man. He served the country in World War II. He was a senior corps in France, and you know, he was just the most ethical when it came to business practices and his life. He ran his own trucking company. He drove a truck, and you know, I mean, it's a perfect business where people would think you took a, you know, where's this box? I mean, no one ever accused him of a thing in his life. And the most gentle, wonderful man. And even though he didn't have a Jewish education, you know, growing up in Cresco, and things are so very different than, you know, it is today in our modern times. You know, he still was taught by his parents and their parents the principles of Torah and mitzvos that we follow today. And you know, it's just so important for us to take those lessons that our ancestors and our parents and grandparents and uncles and what have you have taught us, and to continue to lead by our own example for our children, and so that they can learn that crucial piece of chinuch, that, you know, if you're at home and you're cheating on your taxes, or you're doing this, you're cutting corners, your kids are going to learn that message. But if you're at home and you're doing the ethical right thing, your kids will learn that lesson too. And it's really the only way that they will do that is by seeing from your own example. So I've been lucky to have those role models. I know that my wife has as well, both through her mother and her father and her grandmother, and so we've been very lucky, and it's really a charge to us to continue that and to hope that we can live up to that type of weighty, that responsibility as well. So very quickly, I'll just read the last little part of the Masachet. Again, I highly recommend it. There's a great app. He does it each daf in about 45 minutes, and he's fantastic. And there's only 22 dafim, so you can. I'm telling you, it's good for the drive. So the question they ask is, what happens if a ger gives the shekel, okay, and he's giving it for one korban. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but he gives for one korban, and it ends up that it's not needed for that korban. What happens to that shekel? And in a lot of these cases, the choices are you either raise it in kedusha and you give it to a higher type of offering, or you save it until the next Beis HaMikdash is built, and then Eliyahu will figure it out. Or the third option, believe it or not, and this is an interesting thing too, is to literally take it and throw it in the Dead Sea, and where no one can use it. And I wonder how many shkalim are sitting in the bottom of the Dead Sea right now because of that. So the Gemara asks, do you take this and take the shekel until the next Beis HaMikdash is eventually built? Shema Yibana Beis HaBayis Kerishona Vitarin Trumas Halishka Mina Chadasha Bismana V'Achav Nisan. Maybe if you do that, the new Beis HaMikdash will be built on the 1st of Nisan, just like the original one was built on the 1st of Nisan. And the 1st of Nisan is the fiscal date for the treasury, and that's why, just by the way, we do the Machzis Shekel now by Adar, because you want to have the shkalim into the bank accounts for the 1st of Nisan so that they can use it. And in fact, everyone when there's Beis HaMikdash, even if you live in Chutz La'aretz, is required to do this. So if it's going to take you longer to get it there, you have to send it a couple months earlier, and they go into that. But since it might be the new Beis HaMikdash also is the 1st of Nisan, but here, in the case of this money, why are you worried about it? So Rav Amuna, Rav Ada Bar Ahava, B'Shem Rav, Rav Amuna, Rav Ada Rav, and said the name Rav Halacha Rabbi Shimon, that the halacha is in the accordance of Rabbi Shimon, saying that when the Beis HaMikdash is not in effect, then if you consecrate money for Bikurim, which is what this guy did, it ends up not being a real consecration. The money is not kadosh, so you don't have that problem, and that's not a problem. But if you do today take a half shekel and you do makdish it and make it consecrated, then it does take into effect, and you must throw it in the Dead Sea. And so then again, we could all get the scuba license and figure that out, where all that money is going to end up being. So again, a very wonderful Masachet, and I appreciate your patience. I appreciate many of you for coming who wouldn't have otherwise, but on very, very short notice. And hopefully Shlomis will have an aliyah, and we'll have a supposed to learn and act in their footsteps. Hadron Allah Kol Harokim, V'Saka Allah Mesachas Shkalim. Now we hope I practice this enough, right? Hadron Allah Mesachas Shkalim, Hadron Allah. That's on Allah Mesachas Shkalim, that's on Allah. When Yishtei Minach Mesachas Shkalim, V'Lo Nishnei Minan, V'Lo B'Ali Hadim, V'Lo B'Ali Da'ate. You're someone from the Adonai Elohim V'Lev Seinu. Shetei Saratzka Amenosenu V'Olam Hazeh. Shetei Imanu L'Olam Haba. Chanina Bar Papa, Rami Bar Papa, Nachman Bar Papa, Achai Bar Papa, Abamari Bar Papa, Rafam Bar Papa, Rachim Bar Papa, Surcha Bar Papa, Ad Bar Papa, Daru Bar Papa. Harav L'Adonai Elohim Es Divrei Saratzka B'Finu V'Yot Amcha Beis Yisrael V'Yiniyah Kulanu Anachnu V'Tzatzeinu Amcha Beis Yisrael Kulanu Yidei Shedinachal V'Lamdei Torazachal Lishma. Me'evai Himemi V'Tzasacha Hi L'Olam Hi Li. Yehi Libi Tamim Mechukacha L'man Lo Yivosh L'Olam Lo Ashkach B'Kudecha Kivam Chiyitani Baruch Atah Adonai L'Amdini Chukacha Amen 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 Tzela V'Ed Modim Nachnu L'Fanecha Adonai Eloheinu V'Leil V'Seinu She'Santa Chalkinu M'Yoshvei Beis HaMidrash V'Lo Santa Chalkinu M'Yoshvei Karnios She'Anu Mashkivim V'Hem Mashkivim Anu Mashkivim V'Divrei Torah V'Hem Mashkivim V'Divrei B'Teilim Anu Amilim V'Hem Amilim Anu Amilim U'Mekabim Schar V'Hem Amilim V'Enu Mekabim Schar Ana Ratzim V'Hem Ratzim. Ana Ratzim L'Chayo Olam Haba V'Hem Ratzim L'Ver Shachas. Shenamar V'Ata Elohim Torideim L'Ver Shachas Anshe Damim U'Mima Lo Yafasum Yimehem V'Ani Avtach Lach. Yirah Som Milfanecha Adonai Elohai Keshem Shazartani L'Sayim Masechet Shkalim Hen Tazireni Laskil Masechtos Isfarim Achim L'Saimam Lilman Ulami Lishmor Lasos Ilokayim Eskoli Great Talmud Toratacha Be'Ava Uzukus Kol Hatzavnayim V'Amorayim